The views or opinions expressed on Ann Arbor Inclusive do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the City of Ann Arbor and the Commission on Disability Issues. For more information about the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues, please visit a2gov.org/disability resources.
Hello and welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive. I'm Tom Hoatland, your relatively new host. I'm honored to represent the City of Ann Arbor and the Ann Arbor Commission on Disability Issues with our show. Today, we are pleased to be highlighting a local nonprofit deep-seated in our local communities. The Ann Arbor Center for Independent Living was founded in 1976 because, at the time, people with disabilities could not access public venues such as schools, work, and even doctors and dentist offices. A man named Ed Roberts founded the first CIL in Berkeley, California. The Ann Arbor CIL was not far behind when it became only the fourth center in the country and the first here in Michigan. Today, we highlight one of the vital program areas of the CIL, and that is their employment services. It's alarming that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is more than double the national unemployment rate. A majority of people with disabilities that are unemployed have unique and varied talents, and they want to work. But there are too many existing barriers, myths, and disincentives that keep them from moving forward. This presents a myriad of problems, including isolation and depression. I would like to introduce Paula Finnegan, the Ann Arbor CIL's Employment Services Program Manager. Paula, welcome to Ann Arbor Inclusive.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. So tell us about what areas or counties that the Ann Arbor CIL covers.
The Ann Arbor CIL covers Washtenaw County, Livingston County, and Monroe County. Our most established facility is in Ann Arbor, and we also have an affiliate office located in Monroe, Michigan, covering Monroe County.
Okay.
We are projected to have an office setting in Livingston County within the next year.
Nice. That's a lot of coverage in this area. So who are your customers, and are there age or disability requirements?
That's a great question. So our service area, we serve all people with disabilities, and that can be any disability.
Okay.
There are no age requirements for our programming, and we don't have the same eligibility requirements as, say, the Social Security office might. So our definition of disability is a little bit different, and it covers a wide range of different disabilities. So for someone to qualify for our services, we do not require that they have any sort of a doctor's note or any sort of proof of disability or a demonstrated history. If someone is being affected by a disability, even if it has never been diagnosed by a doctor, we're still able to help that person.
Okay, that sounds great. So among the many programs of the CIL, we're obviously going to focus on employment. With that said, what is your role and responsibilities at the CIL?
My title is the Employment Program Manager at the CIL. So in addition to providing services to individuals and their families, I'm also responsible for overseeing the employment programming, as well as creating new employment programming and assessing its effectiveness.
Okay. And I imagine that under the umbrella of employment services, or employment programs, there's probably a lot of services. Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Absolutely. So in terms of our employment services that we offer to the public, I'd like to highlight a few areas that kind of give a picture of the sorts of services that we offer.
Sure.
One of those is our monthly employment workshops that are open to the public. Even if you've never come into the center before, never worked with us before, you're invited to come to these once monthly workshops. And they're around topics that would be beneficial to job seekers, and specifically job seekers with a disability. So for example, we recently held our speed interviewing class. And so we provided instruction kind of on a one-on-one basis to job seekers, and then invited them to come to a speed interviewing session where they had access to real HR hiring managers from the local community.
Wow.
Who have real experience with hiring and are able to provide feedback that's honest and in real time to our job seekers. So,
Such as?
well, such as they might say, you fiddled with your pen throughout the entire interview and that was distracting to me, or you said after every word. And a lot of times in a real life interviewing situation, hiring managers do not feel comfortable providing that feedback that's honest and forthright to job seekers. A lot of times they're discouraged by their managers from doing so, and so sometimes people feel like they had a really great interview and they never hear back and they're just not sure why. So we're happy to be able to have people sit down with real active hiring managers from the community, and sometimes it can result in job placements. So if somebody really wows them in the mock interview,
Right.
they may have an opportunity to have a real...
Nice. So if it's speed interviewing, that means they get to see multiple.
That's right. So
HR
we do about
professionals.
5 or 6 minutes with each hiring professional. And you know, as much as we study employment services and as much as we practice, there is no exact right way for each interviewee to perform with each interviewer. So different hiring managers have different preferences, and it's great to get a wide variety of feedback.
Great. So have you ever had a great interview and never heard back?
Well, certainly, and I would never know why. There's one time in particular that almost happened to me, but because I had an inside scoop, I figured out what happened and was able to fix it.
Oh, wow.
So a friend of mine let me know about a job opportunity at a local ice cream store,
Okay.
and she told me to apply. And so I walked down there, and I saw that there was a help wanted sign in the window, and my plan was to not let them know that I had a friend that was working there, you know, but just to go in and say, hey, I saw your help wanted sign in the window.
Yeah.
Would it be all right if I filled out a paper application? And that's how they did it when I was first looking for jobs. And so I had a very pleasant interaction with the woman behind the counter, and I noticed she had a big cup of pens on the register. And I said, would it be all right if I borrowed one of these pens to fill this out right now to give it back to you? And she said, of course. And I filled out a very careful application. We had such a nice time. I turned it back into her and went on my way. And I thought, all right, I'm going to be working at that ice cream store.
Right.
My friend talked to the woman who had greeted me and said, oh, who was that? How did it go? And she said, oh, I'm going to put this in the no pile, because if she'd really set out today to apply here, she would have brought her own pen with her and not had to borrow one of mine.
Isn't that funny? Just the smallest thing.
And so my friend was able to kind of surreptitiously put my application in the consider it pile. And the manager, when she came on the shift, considered it, interviewed me. I was a great candidate for the position, and I ended up working there for a year to 2 years.
Wow.
Great employee. It had nothing to do with whether or not I brought a pen, but that can be the difference, and I would never have known. And that's why I think it's so important to have actual hiring managers to come in to give that honest feedback, because how else would you learn?
Right. Yeah, you're going to hear all kinds of things, I bet. You need a breath mint, you know, you didn't dress well.
Right.
Probably things like that.
People have nervous tics that they don't even know that they're doing.
Okay. So what other workshops?
Well, for example, we have a resume writing workshop where people can come in and have access to a computer in our computer lab that's free and open to the public, and assistance in creating their own resume. And we really, as part of our independent living philosophy, instead of just sitting down and writing one for our customer, we will help them learn the skills that they will need to operate the word processing system and do it for themselves.
Wow.
So that way, the next time they need to update their resume, they don't have to come find another service provider and make an appointment and sit down. They will have the skills that they need to update it independently.
Any other workshops?
Oh yeah, tons of different workshops, and they're changing all the time. One of my favorite ones that we do is to discuss how to disclose a disability during the hiring process.
Yeah.
So this is a big question for a lot of our customers. Yeah. When do you disclose and how? And you know, there's no one right answer for each person. We just can provide our best practices, and it's going to be different for each individual person.
Yeah. I imagine when you say it's different for everyone, someone with a visible disability, there's nothing to disclose. But if you have a hidden disability, there's that challenge of, do I talk about it?
Right.
And will I get this job if I do?
Yeah.
So that's great that you counsel people like that. So I imagine you have a lot of partners in the community, and I know that you partner with MRS, which is what?
So MRS is Michigan Rehabilitation Services. They're a state-funded agency whose mission is to connect job seekers who have a disability with employment opportunities and training opportunities. And so they're actually a very valued partner for us, and we've been working together with them for years. And so what they will do is they're a separate agency, and they have customers that come to them looking for work and looking for training opportunities. And as they sit down and assess the needs of the individual customer, they may refer to us for individual kind of more in-depth training services.
Okay.
And so through that partnership, we are able to work with youth in secondary education, like high school,
Okay.
ages 14 to 18, as well as adults who are transitioning from secondary education into employment roles or into moving out on their own, getting their first job.
Going to college?
Going to college, yeah, and accessing the resources that are available to them in post-secondary educational opportunities.
Because I imagine, I do know that the ages from 14 to 26 is considered a youth recipient of services, and I imagine they have a lot of support in the, during their school years. But then when they graduate, the services all go away. And so is that where you come in, the center?
That's a great question. So we work with people across the age range, and our services may differ for different age groups. So for example, we provide workshop training in the schools for people in high school. And then as they're transitioning into adulthood, we provide some of those services as they transition. So you're right, there are a lot of resources available to students in schools as provided for by the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Right.
And then at age 26, if they have not been involved in a strong transitional plan, families and the student themselves may be at a loss for what to do next, or they may expect to have the same sorts of supports automatically given to them in a post-secondary educational setting. And while there will be disability resources centers available at post-secondary education, they may not know how to independently access that if it's not already given to them as part of a education plan.
Okay. So I've often heard the term, the acronym IEP. What is that?
An IEP stands for an Individualized Educational Plan, and it is something that is provided through the Americans with Disabilities Act to all students that are in public educational settings.
Okay.
It's a wonderful program, and it allows for teachers to be aware of what a student's disability might be, how it impacts them, and the accommodations that they might need to be successful in a school setting.
Yeah.
And while it's wonderful that there is a team of people that will make sure that those supports are provided, it doesn't always translate to the student having a clear understanding of how their disability impacts them and how to independently ask for those sorts of accommodations. So once the individualized education plan is no longer in place or affecting them, they may sometimes not even know what their disability is called or how it impacts them.
Wow. And so how does the funding work, and do these services cost money?
Great question.
Yeah.
So none of our employment programming will cost our customers a cent. There is no program that we offer at the center that requires payment from the individual customer. Our funding sources are varied, and they include state and federal funding. They include grants that we apply for. They also include our community partners.
Such as MRS?
Such as MRS would provide us funding for if they were to refer one of their customers to us, they would provide us with the funding to provide that service. So yes, MRS is one of our large funding partners. We also do fundraising throughout the year. We have a yearly gala that will be projected for fall of 2019. That's always a really good time.
Yeah.
And then our donors throughout the year are another source of income for us.
Great, great. So tell me, are there any other partnerships that you want to share with us while we're here?
Absolutely. We partner with other community agencies who
Okay.
have similar missions to ours to assist people with disabilities in accessing resources and achieving their independence goals.
Okay.
Some of the ones that are related to employment include the Job Developers Alliance here in Washtenaw County.
Okay.
And it's a group of like-minded community organizations that meet together to kind of troubleshoot any problems that might be happening, plan job fairs so that we can put all of our resources together to make sure that there are good resources in the community for our customers.
Okay.
Another would be the Abilities Alliance in Livingston County,
Okay.
which is a collection of different community resources that aren't necessarily all related to employment, but all kind of have that same mission.
Okay.
In addition, a really exciting opportunity that I wanted to highlight today is Pitch Ipsy 2018.
Tell us what that is.
Here in Ypsilanti, a group of like-minded individuals got together to put together a contest for local small business owners, and it's called Pitch Ipsy, and people who either are planning to start a small business or already own a small business in Ypsilanti, either 48197 or 48198 zip codes, can apply.
All right.
And in the 3 years since they've started, they've given out over $10,000 of funding for these small business owners.
Can you imagine getting that kind of money when you had a small business? I'm sure you could apply that to many different things.
Absolutely, and on those startup costs, that sort of a kind of grant right at the beginning can really jumpstart things.
What are the misconceptions that exist about employing people with disabilities? I know there are. So
Certainly.
what do you think? What are some of those misconceptions and myths?
So some of the work that we do instead of working with job seekers, we also work closely with employers, and we can try to mitigate some of those myths and misconceptions. And so some of the ones that come up frequently are, and people are a little bit shy, they don't necessarily want to share with us what they're nervous about, but one of the main ones is wondering, if I hire someone with a disability and then they aren't working out, the myth and the misconception is that it's impossible to fire them because they're protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act.
Sure.
And that's a very harmful myth because it prevents people from getting the same chance that any other job seeker would get.
I imagine.
You know, if I'm hiring someone, I know that they may not work out down the line, but I still give them that chance, and that chance is not being given to employees with a disability.
Okay.
So the education that we provide to employers includes the knowledge that there are 3 main ways that someone can lose a job if they have a disability. The first of which is the most simple. If you are terminating someone for a reason that is not related to their disability, then you're fine.
Like theft, or you're just not working out based on anybody else, even without a disability.
That's right. If someone's not showing up for their shifts, you can't keep them on no matter why.
Right.
So another way that someone might not be able to stay in a job is if they are not qualified for that job. So the misconception is that, oh, well, if they apply and they have a disability, I have to hire them or else they'll sue me. But employers are protected if the job seeker is unqualified or less qualified than other applicants. So for example, if I were applying for a job to be a mechanical engineer, but I don't have an engineering degree, I'm not qualified for that job, and no matter what disability I have, no one is required to hire me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the final way that employers are protected is if someone's disability is posing a threat to the health and safety of their surroundings, then you are not required to maintain them in that position.
Okay, all right.
So we provide that training for employers, and they're able to feel confident that because it's us telling them what the law says and how they're protected, that they're now more comfortable hiring people with disabilities and trying to have a good job fit.
Okay. I know I've heard having a disability myself, I've heard, employees with disabilities have more sick days. They sort of fall behind their peers in work production and those kinds of things. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely, yes. And that is another misconception that comes up frequently, that people might not be very upfront with sharing with us that that's their fear.
Yeah.
But we know that it's pervasive. So it's actually been studied and been proven that on average, employees with disabilities use fewer sick days because they're aware of the stigma and they want to prove, in part, they want to prove that it's not the case. And so a lot of employers have given us feedback that the people that they've hired who have a disability are their hardest workers because they're fighting against that stigma that's been kind of placed on them.
They have something to prove.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, depending on the different disability, if somebody has been living with and managing a disability for their entire life or for a significant amount of time, they're usually more in touch with their health and wellness, and so they're managing it as opposed to an employee that might have never suffered from an illness or had a disability who would be surprised and not sure how to kind of handle that.
Right, right. So this is all great information, but why, sort of in your words, why is it important, why is employment important for people with disabilities?
Employment is important for people with disabilities. It fits in with our independent living movement, which is all about autonomy and choice.
Okay.
And so if somebody is deciding for you what your potential is and what you're able and allowed to do, that's always going to be more restrictive than if you're given the autonomy to choose that for yourself. And so what we really strive to do is eliminate those barriers that might be standing in between somebody with a disability and the training and employment opportunities that they want.
Okay.
And so if the person is able to access that and go after their goal, they're going to achieve more than what might be expected based on someone else's expectations.
Right, right.
Absolutely. And as you mentioned, the unemployment rate for people with disabilities is twice that of the general population, and employers are missing out on that talent pool, and the economy is going to suffer if that talent is not being accessed.
Right. Have you found that the people with disabilities that you work with or that you know of want to work? I mentioned this in the introduction that most people with disabilities want to work, but there's all these disincentives or the barriers we talked about. Has that been your experience from people you work with?
Absolutely, yes, absolutely. Isolation is a symptom of unemployment, and if we think about the periods of time in our lives that we were unsure about our income or unsure about our next job, those are some of the most difficult emotional times of life. And to think, of people having low expectations for you and not giving you the same opportunities as others, and that stretches on and on, it is definitely a detriment to people's mental health and sense of well-being. And so all the people I talk to are excited to get out, engage in the community, work, provide for themselves, and plan for their futures.
Right, right. I know from personal experience, as far as employment goes, I was out of work for a good probably 2 years after I was injured. The Gulf War had just started and the unemployment rate was sky high, and it was not a good time to try to find a job. And even though I had a child and I was married, I still felt, while I was not working, I still felt, like you said, isolated, and I think probably suffered from some depression because I had a very promising career prior to my injury. I was in the hotel industry, and I worked crazy hours, and I loved my job, and I think we know that when you have a job, some of the feelings about that is that you are needed, you're valued, you learn, you even have friends. at work, and all those things are important to overall happiness and quality of life. And I found that when I went back to work, what first helped is going to volunteer somewhere, nonprofit or in an industry that you're interested in. And if you're a really good volunteer, you get recognized. And a lot of times jobs come out of that. And that's exactly what happened with me. I was a volunteer. And from that, I ended up getting offered a job. And that changed my life. It really did. It gave me all those things back, the worth, the self-worth, and providing for my family and all those benefits. I didn't have as much free time, but that was a good thing. I was occupying my time with something very important and very near and dear to me. So I'm glad we focused on this subject. But I imagine you mentioned that your funding is diversified, and I imagine part of that, as you mentioned, is fundraising and donors. How can people support the CIL?
Great question.
Yeah.
In addition to our ongoing fundraising campaigns, we do have the annual gala that I mentioned.
Yeah.
It's a formal affair, black tie, plated dinners. It's a beautiful event, auction. If you don't want to wait until fall of 2019, you can always visit our website, www.annarborcil.org/fundraising.
Okay.
We also accept donations over the phone at 734-971-0277 or in person, and we love to see our donors and thank them in person, and so that's a great way to support the center.
So can people come to the CIL and get introduction or a tour?
Absolutely.
Can people schedule that?
Yes. So if you call our number and say that you're interested in a tour, either at our Ann Arbor location or at our Monroe location, we love to show people around. We highlighted our employment program today, but we also have recreational programming, youth services programming. We have a gymnasium in our Ann Arbor location.
Wow.
A full kitchen where we offer healthy cooking classes. We have an art studio where art classes are held. And we love to show people what we've got.
I bet, yeah. All right, so I want to thank you for coming in today. If you have a disability and struggling with the symptoms of unemployment, as Paula said, check out our website at www.annarborcil.org. Give them a call at 734-971-0277. And a thank you to our viewers for tuning in and spending time with Ann Arbor Inclusive. Until next month, I'm Tom Houtland. Have a warm and pleasant holiday season. Thank you.